Greetings and welcome to the Cancer Interviews podcast. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Bruce Morton. Our guest on this episode went through an arduous journey before surviving lung cancer. Along the way, he lost a lung, but Gary Brausen of Bloomington, Minnesota has made it his life's mission to give back. So now let's hear his story. And Gary, welcome to Cancer Interviews.
Hello, Bruce. Great being here. Thank you for having me.
Now, what we like to do at the beginning is learn a little bit more about our guest, which in this case is you. So if you would, tell us a little bit about where you're from, what you do for work, and when you have time for fun, what you do for fun.
Okay, I was born in St. Paul. I'm a lifelong Minnesotan. I am the middle son of three boys. Growing up, my passion was sports. And I would say we played everything with the neighbors and we'd get together and play whatever sport was in the season we would play. I would say golf and ice hockey were my two favorites. I attended the University of Minnesota. I have an undergrad degree in electrical engineering, so I'm kind of a nerd. And I have a master's degree at University of St. Thomas in software engineering. And then over the years, I've been working in a variety of high-tech companies in various capacities. I currently work for a company called Verdium LLC in Southern California. I work out of an office in Minnesota, and I'm a director of engineering for that company. So that's kind of a little bit about where I grew up and the education and kind of what I've been doing with my life professionally.
Growing up in Minnesota and playing hockey, I have this image of your playing hockey outdoors. Did you ever do that?
I did it up to the age of 50, Bruce. I started probably when I was 7 or 8 years old, and I'd go with my father to the local rink at Falcon Heights Elementary School, which is where I went to school my elementary days. And I didn't stop playing. I had buddies that we would meet on a Saturday and Sunday mornings up to age 50, up to the point of being diagnosed with lung cancer. I was still playing outdoor hockey, and it's probably one of the greatest experiences in life.
It sounds like an easy way to get cold.
Well, I remember one time vividly, and I was just talking to my bride about this the other day. We played one morning, and we just did it just to be able to talk about it later. It was -9 degrees, and we went out and played for probably 45 minutes, about all we could take. And I was wearing glasses because my contacts would freeze to my eyes. And when it was that cold, so I wore glasses. And when they steamed up, and I remember taking them off, and they just crumbled in my hands. That's how cold it was. And that was probably the coldest we ever played at. But we had a lot of great years doing it, a lot of great hockey, good hockey players too, a lot of former high school, college players would come down. It was pretty high-end hockey. It was a lot of fun.
By the way, if you like what you hear in this segment, we invite you to subscribe to our podcast by clicking the links below. Once there, you'll see a bell icon, and if you click on that, we will notify you when we post a new interview. Now, Gary, let's get to your cancer journey. It sounds like you were leading a pretty healthy lifestyle prior to your diagnosis. When did you notice that something was awry, something wasn't quite right?
So it all started in November of 2010. And it was probably right around Thanksgiving, I started noticing a cough. And, I didn't think much of it. I remember having phone calls with my father at the time, and he was coughing too. Everybody was coughing, that at that time of the year. And then what was different about mine is it just kept getting progressively worse. He got better. I didn't. I even went to the doctor, one of my first doctor's appointments, and she said, "Oh, you have what I have. You have just a cold." But what happened is over time, as this thing progressed, I was coaching my son's hockey team, and I was playing 3 mornings a week indoors with my buddies. And I had to start, and I had a really aggressive travel schedule for work. And I found myself, quitting or delaying. I actually stepped down from being my son's hockey coach. I couldn't run the practices anymore because every time I yelled, I would cough, and then I was delaying travel too because I was just not well enough. And then I think what really got me thinking that something seriously was wrong. I was walking around work, and a dear friend of mine came up to me, and he said, "Gosh, you look like, you know what? You look terrible," but he used a different word than that. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go look at myself in the mirror and take a look at myself. And I looked in the mirror, and I thought, the first thing I thought of, Bruce, was, I look like I'm dying. And I actually was. And that, you know, as the follow-on doctor's appointments, they finally figured out what it was. I was actually dying.
So at that time, were you diagnosed, or was there a further chain of events that led to your diagnosis?
Yeah, so I started out at it. We have these things called minute clinics, and I went in for a quick appointment. I was coughing, and she said, "Well, you probably have bronchitis." And so she gave me some pills. That didn't work. And then I ended up going to my primary care physician, and that's when she said, "Well, you have a cold. It'll go away. You have what I have." And of course it didn't. And then I went back a third time, and my doctor said, "This is really nothing to be concerned about. I think you should just rest and get well." And as I stood up and I turned to walk out the door, a voice in my head said, "Get a chest x-ray and get it right now." And so I turned around and looked at her, and I said, "I want a chest x-ray, and I'm not leaving here till I have one." And so I got a chest x-ray, and then they thought it was pneumonia. And then they treated me for pneumonia. They gave me the most aggressive antibiotics that typically treats pneumonia. And of course that didn't work. And then the thing that finally got us thinking about that this is something really strange or odd, I had a CT scan done, and the doctor, the pulmonologist, I went to see him. He was going over my results. He said, "I would have thought these were the lungs of an 80-year-old man, and here I am. I'm 50 years old. I'm as good a shape as I've ever been in my life. Strong, playing hockey 3 mornings a week with really good hockey players. You got to be in great shape." And that's when they thought it was something a little more involved and a little more serious. And so I had a bronchoscopy done, and that's when they take some tissue samples and they test them, and that's where it came back, lung cancer. And I ended up getting I was notified of this diagnosis over the phone. My pulmonologist called me. I was sitting in my house, and nobody else was home, and he said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Brausen, you have lung cancer." And that started the whole thing. And it turned out kind of interesting enough that my neighbor was my pathologist. So he did all the slide work. He expedited everything for me. And so for us, I should say, and I remember watching after I got the phone call, watching for him to come home because I was terrified, right? And I went over and said, tell me about what you found. He said, "Let me get you a beer first." And so we sat down, and he said, "You have an extremely aggressive form of adenocarcinoma. And I would suggest I'd figure out how do you want to spend your last days," is basically what he told me. He was a no-nonsense pathologist. And so that's kind of how it all happened, how I found out, and then all the testing, biopsy, further on biopsies and scans and PET scans and brain MRIs and all these things to figure out how advanced it was. And I was diagnosed with stage 3B lung cancer, which is, I was basically weeks from stage 4. And they typically don't they typically won't treat stage 4, or they don't attempt to cure stage 4 cancer. It's different today. Things have, a lot of things have changed today, but back then nobody would touch stage 4 because it was just not a good. It would not be typically a good outcome of trying to treat somebody that's stage 4.
Gary, obviously, no parts of your answer to this question are going to be pleasant, but I want to hear you articulate it. You had mentioned you were terrified, as I suspect anybody would be when they got that news. But what are some of the things that went through your mind when you got that horrific news?
Well, I had 2 young boys. They were 10 and 13, and they were, those are very impressionable ages, as you can imagine. So they were, and I felt like I had a lot of life to give still. I wanted to see them. I felt, I didn't want to miss out on them growing up as men, and I just didn't feel like I didn't feel like I didn't. First of all, I never accepted this as a death sentence for me, and but that what went through my mind is I felt like I was too young to die, and I had 2 young boys that I wanted to be here for, and that's all I thought about. Nothing else mattered but those 2 boys and my wife, and making sure that I could be on this earth longer and see them grow up to be men and spend some more time with my bride. Those are the things that went through my mind.
And to what degree were your wife and sons a source of support during this time?
Amazing. It's just amazing. My wife was she was my drill sergeant. Mm-hmm. We're a pretty fit family, and on the days that I didn't want to get up and go for a walk. I mean, I got down to a point, Bruce, I was so sick I couldn't even walk around our block. In March I was playing hockey, and in December, January, or no, that following year I couldn't even walk around the block. That's how sick I was. But she would push me. She was my advocate. She'd push me to get my rear in gear, and because exercise, in my opinion, is really important when you're battling something like this, both for the mind and the body. So she set up a Carrying Bridge site, which I was not a fan of. I don't know if you're familiar with Carrying Bridge, but it's a website where you can communicate what's going on to your family and friends, and they can offer support. I was not a fan of that because I thought the only people that have Carrying Bridge sites are people that are dying. I never believed I was dying. But she talked me into it. It's the greatest thing that she ever did. Made her life easier. I got lots of support through it. That was really important. And then my kids. So Rosie was my drill sergeant and my advocate and my support, just my frontline support person. My kids, they have deep faiths, and they prayed for me, night after night. They would get on their knees and pray for my healing and pray for my wellness and pray for my recovery. And they have amazing faiths, and they continue to do so today. And we do attribute some of this healing, a lot of this healing to that.
And boy, it sounds like those prayers have been answered.
They have, in spades. Yeah. And, the thing that I don't understand, Bruce, is, there's a lot of people that are prayed for that are in difficult situations, difficult situations like mine or even worse. And we can't figure out why some people survive and some people don't. It's one of the greatest unanswered questions that we have in this life, and we won't know. We may never know why, or we may find out later. I don't know. But it was an important, and I prayed myself. I would get on my knees and pray scripture over myself. It was really important. When you have cancer, and this, everything is stripped away. There's everything. Nothing matters. You're stripped down to the bare essentials in your life. And what is left? Your faith and your family and your friends. That's it. There's nothing else that matters. I look at all my possessions. Nothing mattered. My house, my cars, all the stuff I have didn't matter. And it doesn't matter today. I'm forever changed. That stuff doesn't matter. I place huge value in relationships, experiences, family and friends. That's what it's all about.
Now, after getting this awful news, you had to be treated. If you would, describe your treatment regimen.
Yeah, so I went in and I met with a surgeon, and I think that was really important in my recovery and my healing, was to get most of the cancer out of my body. My left lung was saturated in cancer cells, and so they decided. And even though it was stage 3B, which means it's starting to leave that one organ, they decided they're going to take this lung out. And so I'll never forget it. And I said, so when are we going to do this? And he said, oh, we're going to do this next week. What? And I went in a week. They did one more test. They did what is called a mediastinoscopy, I think is the name. They go down through your chest. They make an incision here, and they fish around. They're looking for cancer in there. And they said, if that comes back negative, we're a go. And so that was on a Tuesday. And then on a Thursday, and I'll never forget it, April 7th, 2011, I went in and had even my surgeon said, afterwards, he said, after I survived it, he said, this is a really tricky procedure, and it's the most painful procedure that we do at this hospital. That includes open heart surgery, anything, because they cut through so much tissue through the back, and there's so many nerve endings in your back attaching to your spinal cord. It's a very painful thing, and I found that out in a real sense. So then, after the surgery was done, they gave me about a 4 to 6 week break, and then they said, we're going to hit you hard with chemo, because they did all the biomarker testing that they knew of at the time, EGFR, and I think there was one other, and I didn't qualify for any of the more direct treatments for those biomarkers. So they used the tried and true that they've been using for 20 plus years. 30, probably even longer. Cisplatin and Alimta were the two chemotherapies they gave me, and I asked my doctor. I said, so in the spectrum of severity of symptoms, where are these, or side effects? Where are these drugs? And he said, these are pretty harsh. And I found that out. So that was over 3 months. Did 3 months of that. It was 4 treatments. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking those drugs, that's about all of the human body can withstand, are 4 treatments of that stuff. Because my doctor even said, we're going to take you to the edge of death, and then we're going to back off 10%. So that's what he said. And so then they gave me another 4 to 6 week break, and we actually ended up taking a trip. We went to London between chemo, and then we're going to do 7.5 weeks of radiation, and so we went to London and for 2 weeks, and there's all sorts of stories behind it, but one of the hardest things I've ever done. Very compromised immune system, as you can imagine, after being through all that chemo and surgery. We went to London, and then I had 7.5 weeks of radiation, and by the end of that, which that timed out the very end of October, right around Halloween of 2011, and there wasn't much left of me after all that. I'd lost, all of my muscle mass. I'd lost 25 to 30 pounds, and I remember going back in the gym after that and trying to get on a flat bench and doing some just some dumbbell presses, and I could only do 5 pounds. And at the beginning of the year, I could do 60 pounds. That's how compromised I was. And so, yeah, it was all three. They hit me with all three, and we actually got a second opinion out at Dana-Farber in Boston, and they said, we would do the same thing. So we had great confidence that was a good plan for me, and the best. They called it the kitchen sink approach. They're going to throw everything they got at it, and they didn't expect me to live, Bruce. After all that, in fact, I went in for my first scan in February of 2012, and I remember looking at my oncologist's face, and he looked at me, and he said, "I don't see any cancer anywhere. Your organs look good. Your lymph nodes look good. There's nothing anywhere." And he was stunned after all that. And then, so we did that every 6 months for 5 years. And then the second one came, and he said, "I don't see any cancer in here either." Still stunned. And then we got to 2 years of clean scans. He looked at me, I'll never forget it, and he said, "I think you might have beat this." And, of course, we're sobbing, tears in our eyes. And then we had 3 more years of clean scans, and that was it. I didn't have to see an oncologist anymore. I did have a scare in 2017. I had a pleural effusion, and that looked like a return of the lung cancer, but it turned out to be maybe a lung infection or something like that. But that was a pretty terrifying, because you know what it is, Bruce, and you know this because you're a cancer survivor, right?
Correct.
You don't ever want to go back there. You've been there, you know how bad it is, and you don't ever want to go back. And in 2017, it was pretty terrifying, thinking that we might have to go back. And I call it the cancer meat grinder, where you're getting treated and you're getting scanned, you're getting poked, and all these things. And I'm just so very thankful that it wasn't.
Our guest is Gary Brausen of Bloomington, Minnesota. He's telling us his story of survivorship with lung cancer. And Gary, I want to hear what you have to say, because I already asked you about some bad news. I want to hear you elaborate on some good news, but I want to circle back just a little bit. You talked about chemo, and chemo can really tire people out. You mentioned the dumbbell presses of 5 pounds. Did you find yourself on the sofa sleeping a lot?
Yes, I did. Yeah, there were days. And then all sorts of other weird stuff too. Like, I think it was after chemo treatment number 2. I had 13. You ever had a sty on your eye? Around your eye? I had 13 styes around one of my eyes, and it was because my immune system was so compromised. And I went to my oncologist, and I said, I called his office, and I said, because I also had a really severe bacterial infection, and I said, I'm quitting. I can't do this anymore. And he says, "I want you to come down here this afternoon. I want to talk to you." So I went down there, and he used to be kind of an eye doctor before he went into oncology. And he looked at my eye, and he said, "I've never seen anything like this in my entire life." Both as an eye, and I thought, wow, that's a little scary, because this guy's seen it all. But he looked at me, and his name's Dr. Joseph Leach, and he's such a great oncologist. And he looked at those steely eyes. He looked at me, and he said, "I will have no part of you quitting. This is your only path to survival." And I said, "Okay." And so we got it. Took weeks and months for those styes to go away, and for me to get better. And but we were able to proceed with the other treatments on schedule. And there's chemotherapy is weird, because there's no guarantee that you're going to stay on track, and those cycles are very important. Mine was every 3 weeks, right? And they time it like just when it's starting, the drugs are starting to wear off, that's when they hit you again. And they want to make sure that they keep that cycle, that 3-week cycle, intact. And and we were able to stay on track, even though there's that bump in the road and we had some others along the way. But you're right. Fatigue was a huge, I had some other weird, like I had a really bad taste in my mouth. Like everything tasted like, I couldn't even drink water because it tasted like sewage. And of course your appetite, I was eating, I asked a doctor, I said, I can't eat anything. Nothing tastes good. He said, well, try McDonald's. So I ended up going to McDonald's. I went to McDonald's like three times. He said, calories are the most important thing to you right now. You need calories. And it doesn't matter if they're healthy or not. Just get some food in your system. So that's what I did. So it's just some weird, besides fatigue, weird stuff.
Now, where chemo is concerned, you had the kitchen sink thrown at you. And yet, I'm guessing you will have the same answer to this question that a lot of our guests have who underwent chemo treatment. Chemo, I hope, is very much in your rearview mirror. Are you glad that you underwent chemo as opposed to not? And the alternative that could come with not undergoing chemo?
You know what? And I'm glad I did. And here's why, Bruce. So I've kind of devoted, some of the free time that I have to mentoring cancer patients. In fact, I'm doing that now. I'm talking, and I've done this for the last, 10, 12 years, probably 8, 9 years, talking with other cancer patients. And unfortunately, many of them have passed away. But to know what they're going through, to be able to relate, and for me to tell them, hey, I've been through this. I've had chemo. I know what it feels like. And that resonates with these folks. And there's a trust that builds up with patients. There's things, and I learned this, Bruce, and I'm sure you did too. When you're a cancer patient, there's things you can talk to your doctor about. There's things you can talk to your family and friends about. But many of them have never had cancer before. So there's a lot of things that you want to discuss with another cancer patient. And I didn't have any of that. I didn't have cancer patients that I could turn to that had a good outcome. So I'm trying to be that beacon for other people that follow me. That, hey, I had a really serious case. I had surgery. I had chemo like you. I had radiation like you. I know what it feels like. Here's some of the things I did to cope with it. So long answer to your question. I'm glad. I know what it feels like. And it's awful. It's horrible. But it also it helps me with them. It also gives me perspective in my life. Now that I'm a healthy man, I'm so much more thankful on how I feel day to day because I know how horrible that whole experience was.
Well, Gary, here's something else that I hope resonates with the people with whom you interact. I had asked you about the very bad news you got with your diagnosis, but you had found out in stages that you were getting the upper hand on this cancer. How exciting was that news, and how exciting is it to pass that along to the people to whom you speak?
Well, it was, we couldn't believe, well, first of all, it was incredulous to us that this was actually happening, because the news from my story was horrible, horrible, horrible for quite a long time. Then all of a sudden, the tables flipped when I got that first scan result back. Then my doctor was kind of thinking, something's going on here that's really good. And yeah, it felt really good. But one thing that we learned, which was really interesting, when you're in an oncology office and you get good news, you walk back, and we were very, very aware of this, and you walk back into the waiting room, and there's all sorts of other people there in all different stages and phases of cancer. We wanted to make sure that we did not go out there and we kept our good news under our hats, because we didn't want other people to feel bad when we were walking through. But I try to be, I try to be to the patients that I talk to, if they're having good news, then I'll share my good news with them. But I also want to be, I don't want to say to them, gosh, I had some really great news when they're not getting such great news. So I try to really be careful about what I share and how much I share of my journey. And it's really based on what I do, more listening and then apply, and then communicating to them, elements of my story that fit in without making them feel bad about what they're going through. That's what I do.
And how important is that to you in your life as it goes forward, this whole notion of giving to others and sharing with others your information, and the listening part too?
It has been, I don't know how I could have done it without this, I call it my mission in life. And I don't know what I'd do without it, Bruce, because, you can do a couple things when you're done with the cancer journey. You can try to forget it ever happened and run away, and with your hands over your ears, or you can stay in the game and give something back. And that helped me, because when you come out of something like that, and this, there's a lot of collateral mental damage coming out of it. And I wanted to forget about myself. I didn't want to sit around and think about, because you're thinking about, oh, is this ever going to come back? And you wake up with a little ache in the side, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, it's back. I didn't want to live that way. I wanted to concentrate on other people and not think about my own situation. And this is an avenue where I'm not thinking about my own situation. Not to say I don't from time to time, but the focus is not on me anymore. It's on them. And it has served me to forget about myself and forget about what I had been through, and put my situation and my case in the rearview mirror.
Now, you've talked about the sharing, this helping on an individual basis, but in terms of being affiliated with an organization, there is an organization in the Twin Cities that is very aggressive in this sort of thing, and you're a part of it, and that's the A Breath of Hope Lung Foundation. Could you just let our listeners and viewers know what A Breath of Hope does for others, and services of which they can avail themselves by going through A Breath of Hope?
Sure. First of all, I am so proud to be a part of this organization. So I met Nancy Torreson is our executive director, and shortly after my journey, I believe it was in 2012, I gave some money to this organization, or we gave some money, and she gave me a call back, and she thanked me. I said, well, if there's anything I can do to get involved, I would love to. And we struck up a friendship. And she said, well, why don't you join our board? So I've now been on the board for A Breath of Hope Lung Foundation. This is my 9th year, and I'm the co-chair of the board of directors there. And it's been an incredible journey serving in this organization. And I'm so proud of it. So it's an organization it's Minnesota-based. It is dedicated to lung cancer. We don't, we don't tackle other diseases, other lung sort of diseases. We are focused on lung cancer only. And there's three prongs of what A Breath of Hope is all about. First is patient support. So we have programs where, we'll pick up, there's some people, sadly enough, I can't believe this, that can't get themselves to their treatments because they have no means of getting there. And so we have rides, we have volunteers that will pick up patients at their house and drive them to their appointments to make sure that they stay on track with their treatment schedule. And, we have grief groups, for widows and widowers, and for patients and caregivers. So patient support is huge, and it's something that's kind of what, when I'm talking to other patients, that kind of falls under that umbrella, under that arm of our mission. The second kind of the second leg of the three-legged stool, we like to say, is awareness of the disease. We want people to know about lung cancer. We want to know it's the deadliest form of cancer globally and in the United States. It kills more people per year than any other form of cancer. And we want people to know too that it's, the outdated stigma that it's a smokers only disease. It's not true. I never smoked a day in my life. I'm a never smoker. And I know several other people that have contracted lung cancer that never smoked. So we're big on, the other part of awareness is radon. Radon can cause lung cancer. So we're very big on spreading awareness on, eliminating the smoking stigma and letting people know that radon, and we hand out free radon kits. We do things like that. So making people aware of the disease. It's severe. Oh, and the other thing about awareness is, what are the symptoms of lung cancer? Cough, fatigue, shoulder pain, amongst many other possible blood clots. I just learned blood clots it could be a potential symptom for lung cancer. So just letting people know about the disease itself, how severe it is, what are some of the symptoms, and then educating them on radon and the fact that anyone with lungs, doesn't mean if you smoked or not, can get lung cancer. And the final leg of the three-legged stool is research. And we're most proud. I'm not going to say we're most proud, but we're very proud of this. So we basically fund research fellows in universities we fund their projects that are lung cancer specific. So what'll happen is, we'll have a new $150,000 fellowship. And we'll get applications from doctors from all over the country, from some of the leading medical research facilities in the country, and then we will vet these projects, and then we will choose one, and we will fund this fellow for 2 years with $150,000, and then they provide us status reports of what they're working on, and there's some really exciting things that are happening now. And I cannot, in terms of research, Bruce, I cannot even believe what has happened since my journey with lung cancer. It's amazing. Patients are living longer. Patients are living better. And more people are getting cured today than ever before. So there is hope. And there is a lot of hope. But are we there yet? No. There's a lot more hope. I mean, there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And even when I'm not on the board anymore after this year, I will stay affiliated to this organization until the day I die. I cannot say enough about how efficient we are. I think if I remember right, we spend for every dollar that we raise that is donated, we spend 80 cents, on our programming. So it's a very, very low overhead organization. So we take the money that we are given and we give it to our programs, and they make significant. They do significant things for the lung cancer community and the illness.
And if somebody wants to contact A Breath of Hope, its web address is, and this is all one word, one big word, abreathofhope.org. Abreathofhope.org if you want to contact A Breath of Hope. Gary, that's going to wrap things up for this episode. I really appreciate your story. Very informative and very inspirational, as I suspect is in lockstep with all the communication you have with people who are going through lung cancer journeys. So, Gary, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome, Bruce. It was my pleasure.
And that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Cancer Interviews. We want to remind you, if you are on a cancer journey or a loved one is, that you are not alone. There are plenty of people like Gary who are ready to be there with you and help you along the way. So until next time, we'll see you on down the road.
Thanks for joining us today. For more information, please visit us online at cancerinterviews.com. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you back here again next time on the Cancer Interviews Podcast.